No one would buy her. Abandoned in a Wild West market until a rancher saw her. The sun rose slowly over the dusty streets of the small Wild West town, its light glinting off the wooden roofs and the metal tips of wagon wheels. The market square was already alive with activity. Merchants shouted over the clatter of hooves and the cries of animals. Pots clanged, fabrics rustled, and coins clinked as townsfolk haggled over everything from fresh vegetables to chickens. The air was thick with dust, and the smell of hay and the sound of laughter and argument mixed in a way that made the place feel alive and chaotic. In the middle of the square, near a rickety wooden stall, a young girl stood quietly. She was small and thin, her hair tangled and dusty from weeks of traveling and sleeping under the open sky. Her clothes were worn and patched, the fabric faded and frayed at the edges. She kept her hands folded tightly in front of her, not daring to touch anything, not daring to look anyone in the eye. People passed her without a second glance, some even stepping over the small heap of belongings she had gathered. The girl had been brought to this market by a woman who ran a traveling caravan. She had promised the girl a chance to find a home, a family, or at least someone who would care for her. But now, standing alone among the bustling crowd, the girl realized how difficult it was to be noticed. The merchants focused on their own business. The townsfolk were busy buying supplies or gossiping. Nobody wanted her. She remembered her journey here. For weeks, she had walked through dry fields and over rocky hills, following her parents' old maps and hoping for a safe place. But tragedy had struck. A drought had destroyed her family's farm, and her parents had abandoned her in the hope that someone else might take her in. She did not understand why they had left, why they had chosen to walk away. All she knew was the loneliness that clung to her like a shadow following her wherever she went. The market felt even louder and colder than it had before. She watched a group of boys chase a stray dog, their laughter echoing in the open space. A merchant waved a piece of cloth at a woman and shouted the price, while another man argued with a buyer over the weight of a sack of grain. She tried to make herself small, hoping to disappear among the crowds, yet somehow she felt every eye on her, or rather, felt them deliberately looking away. She noticed the other children in the market, children who had been bought or sold like the items on the stalls. They wore bright, clean clothes, their hair combed neatly, and they laughed and called out to each other. They had homes, even if they were temporary ones. She did not. The contrast made her heart ache. She tugged at the sleeve of her dress and tried to remind herself to be patient, to wait her turn, to hope that someone would stop and look at her with kindness. But the hours passed, and still nobody approached. Her stomach growled quietly. She had eaten little that morning, sharing a stale piece of bread from her small bundle of belongings. She watched the food stalls, the rows of shiny apples, roasted meats, and fresh bread, wishing she could take even a tiny bite. But she did not dare ask. Asking might seem desperate, and she feared rejection more than hunger. Around her, the market seemed oblivious to her existence. A man carrying a basket of chickens bumped into her shoulder, muttering an apology before moving on. A woman with a baby in her arms glanced at her briefly, then looked away, absorbed in her own worries. The girl's heart sank further with every passing moment. She had never felt so invisible in her life, and the thought of being left behind, unwanted, frightened her. She remembered her parents' farm, the small plot of land where she had grown up, despite its hardships. She thought of the dry soil, the cracked well, the animals that had struggled to survive. Her parents had worked endlessly, hoping to keep the farm alive, but nature had turned against them. She had tried to help, to feed the chickens, collect the eggs, water the plants, and do everything she could. And yet, when it was hardest, they had abandoned her. She had cried herself to sleep that night, alone in the dark, and wondered if she would ever find anyone who cared. Now, standing in the busy market, she felt the weight of that loneliness all over again. Her small hands clenched her bundle tightly. Inside were the few precious things she had managed to save. A worn doll, a tin cup, a folded piece of cloth that smelled faintly of home. They were all she had, and even they reminded her of what she had lost. The girl took a deep breath. trying to steady herself. She told herself that someone would notice her eventually, that perhaps a kind heart existed among the rough and hurried townsfolk. She scanned the crowd, hoping for a hint of kindness, a glance that lingered, a smile that would make her believe she was not entirely alone. But day turned slowly into afternoon, and still, the market carried on as if she were not there at all. Exhaustion began to creep into her bones. The sun burned down, and the dust made her eyes water. She felt the rough wooden planks under her feet, the uneven stones of the street digging into her worn shoes. She shifted from foot to foot, trying to ease the ache, but the weight of waiting pressed down harder. She wondered if the woman who had brought her here would return. She hoped she would. Perhaps there was still a chance that someone would see her, someone who would care. A few townsfolk passed by and whispered to each other, casting curious glances at her. One man sneered and muttered, "Worthless little thing. Who would take her?" A woman shook her head, pity mixed with irritation, and said, "Better off on her own than with us." The words stung more than she expected. She bowed her head and hugged herself, trying to make herself smaller, trying to vanish into the shadows between the stalls. She wished for a miracle, a sign that she mattered, that someone would notice the spark of hope she still carried in her heart. Just as the girl began to think she might spend the entire day alone, a gentle breeze swept through the market. It carried the smell of hay, leather, and fresh bread. She lifted her head briefly, catching a glimpse of a figure approaching through the crowd. A tall man on horseback, dust trailing behind his boots. Unlike the other people in the market, he did not shout or push through the crowd. He looked around calmly, observing the people in the stalls, and then, as if guided by some invisible thread, his eyes fell on her. For the first time that day, the girl felt her heart lift, just a little. She held her breath as he walked closer, wondering if he would notice her or simply pass by like everyone else. There was something different in his gaze, something gentle, curious, and attentive. It did not judge her. It did not dismiss her. And for a small moment she allowed herself to imagine that maybe, just maybe, someone would finally care. The market continued to buzz around her, full of noise and chaos, but for that instant, the girl felt a flicker of hope. It was fragile and delicate, like a candle in the wind, but it was enough to keep her standing, to keep her believing that her story was not over, that perhaps her life could change before the day ended. She straightened her back and held her bundle tighter, ready to face whatever would come next, clinging to the small, fragile hope that had finally appeared in the middle of a place that had so far shown her only neglect. The tall man continued walking through the busy market, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust with every step. He was a rancher, used to the wide open fields and the hard work of caring for animals, but he had never seen a child like her before. She stood alone, small and timid, her clothes dusty and worn, her hair tangled from days without proper care. The crowd passed around her like she was invisible, but the rancher's eyes were fixed on her. There was something about the way she held herself, the careful way she hugged her bundle, that told him she had been through much more than any child should endure. He stopped a few feet away, careful not to scare her. The girl noticed him and instinctively shrank back, her big eyes wide and uncertain. She had grown used to being ignored or rejected, and any attention from strangers felt strange and sometimes frightening. But there was something different about this man. He didn't shout or push. He didn't look at her like she was a problem or a burden. Instead, he studied her quietly, as if trying to understand her without words. The market was noisy and chaotic around them. Merchants called out their prices, wagons rattled across uneven stones, and the smell of roasted meat and fresh hay mixed with dust and sweat. But in that small space around her, it felt as if time slowed down. The rancher crouched slightly, bringing himself closer to her level, though he did not reach out yet. "Hello there," he said in a calm voice. "Are you alone?" The girl flinched at first, unsure if she should answer. She had learned long ago not to trust easily. People often said kind things, but those words rarely lasted. Still, something in his tone made her feel a tiny spark of safety. I'm alone," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the noise of the market. "Don't worry," the rancher said gently.
"I'm not going to hurt you. My name is Daniel."
"What's yours?" The girl hesitated. She had gone days without telling her story to anyone. Every time she tried, she felt eyes roll, people sigh, or hands push her away. But Daniel's expression was different. There was patience there, and for the first time she felt the courage to speak. "Lucy," she said quietly. "Lucy," he repeated softly, as if saying her name aloud gave it more meaning. "That's a nice name. You must be very brave to be here all by yourself." Lucy looked down at her feet, uncertain if she had the bravery he described. In her mind she remembered the long nights alone under the stars, the hunger that gnawed at her belly, and the fear of not being wanted. I don't know if I'm brave," she admitted. People don't want me. No one wants me." Daniel's heart ached as he listened. He had seen many hardships in his life, had faced storms, floods, and the harsh realities of ranch life, but he had never seen so much sadness in one small child. "You're wrong," he said kindly. "You're worth much more than they think. Sometimes people just don't know how to see it." Lucy blinked at him, unsure what to make of his words. Nobody had ever said anything like that to her before. In the market she had been ignored, whispered about, and sometimes even laughed at, but here was someone looking at her like she mattered. She took a small step toward him, then stopped, unsure if she should go further. Daniel noticed her hesitation and smiled gently. He didn't want to rush her. "Take your time," he said. "No one's going to hurry you." Slowly, Lucy lowered her bundle and allowed herself to look up at him. His face was weathered from years in the sun, but his eyes were kind. He had a gentle way of moving, and his voice was calm and steady. It made her feel safe, even in the middle of the loud, busy market. Why are you looking at me?" Lucy asked quietly. It was not a question of curiosity, but one of disbelief. She was used to being invisible, ignored by everyone around her. "Because I think you deserve to be seen," Daniel replied. "Not many people notice the quiet ones in the market, but I do." "You're not just a child standing here. You're someone who's been through a lot, and I can tell you've got a strong heart." She had never heard anyone speak to her like this. Usually words were harsh or dismissive, or they carried pity that made her feel smaller. But Daniel's words were different. They didn't make her feel weak. They made her feel that maybe, just maybe, she mattered. The noise of the market seemed to fade as they stood there. Lucy noticed the bright colors of the stalls, the way merchants waved at buyers, the chatter of neighbors greeting each other. But none of it mattered as much as this moment. She felt a strange mix of hope and fear. She wanted to trust him, but trusting had always been dangerous. She had learned to protect herself by staying quiet, staying small, and staying invisible. Daniel seemed to understand her hesitation. "You don't have to talk about anything you don't want to," he said. "But if you want, you can tell me a little about yourself. Only if you're ready." Lucy looked down at the dusty stones beneath her feet. She thought of the long, lonely days since her parents had left, of the nights she had cried under the open sky, of the hunger and the fear and the quiet prayers she had whispered for someone to come. She didn't know why, but something told her that she could tell this man. Slowly, she began to speak. "My parents, they left me," she said, her voice trembling. "The farm, it dried up. There was nothing left," they said. "They said someone else might take care of me, but no one wants me." Daniel listened without interrupting, letting her speak at her own pace. He could see the tears in her eyes, the way her small shoulders shook with the weight of her story. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of bread, breaking it in half. "Here," he said gently, holding it out to her. "You must be hungry." Der Brow stared at the bread for a long moment. She had learned not to expect kindness. But the smell was warm and fresh, and the gesture was simple yet full of care. Hesitantly, she took it, breaking off a small piece with her fingers and eating it slowly. The bread tasted sweeter than anything she had eaten in days, and as she chewed, she felt a small sense of comfort. "You're very brave, Lucy," Daniel said softly. "Even though life has been hard, you've kept going. That takes more courage than most people have." Lucy looked up at him, unsure if she deserved such praise. But his gaze was steady and sincere. It was the first time she had felt seen, not as a burden or a problem, but as a person who mattered. Around them, the market continued to buzz with activity. But Lucy no longer felt completely alone. She had spoken her story aloud and had been met with understanding, not judgment. For the first time in a long time, she felt a small spark of hope, a feeling that maybe her life could change. Daniel smiled, noticing the tiny flicker of hope in her eyes. He knew she had been through more than most children could bear, and he also knew that someone needed to be there to help her heal. He didn't rush her. He didn't try to force anything. Instead, he stood patiently, offering what he could: kindness, attention, and a chance for her to be seen. Hours passed, and still no one else in the market paid Lucy any attention. But she didn't mind as much anymore. She had been seen, and that was enough for now. The thought that someone believed in her, even just a little, gave her courage. She began to wonder what it would be like to have a real home, someone to care for her, and a place where she belonged. Daniel, watching her closely, made a decision. He could not leave her behind in the market, not after seeing the courage and resilience in her eyes. He would take her with him, not as property, not as a transaction, but as someone who deserved care, guidance, and a chance to live fully. The thought filled him with determination, knowing that her life could change forever from this single choice. Lucy, unaware of the decision forming in his mind, finished the bread and clutched her bundle tightly. She felt a warmth in her chest, a fragile feeling of hope that had been missing for so long. Maybe, just maybe, she would no longer be invisible. Maybe, just maybe, someone would finally care for her the way she deserved. And in that crowded, noisy Wild West market, amidst the dust and chaos, a quiet story of hope began. One that would change Lucy's life forever. The sun was climbing higher in the sky, casting sharp shadows across the dusty market, but Lucy barely noticed. She was still holding her small bundle close, feeling the warmth from the bread Daniel had given her earlier. For the first time in days, she felt a tiny spark of hope, one that made her heart feel lighter than it had in a long while. She watched Daniel carefully, unsure what he might do next. He hadn't rushed her, hadn't forced her to talk or move. Instead, he had been patient, gentle, and kind, qualities she had rarely seen in anyone before. Daniel, on the other hand, was making up his mind. He had seen many things in his life: harsh storms, sick animals, long stretches of drought, and the struggles of hard work on the ranch. But he had never seen a child like Lucy. He could tell she had faced more hardship than many adults. Her tiny frame, her careful movements, and her cautious eyes told a story of resilience, survival, and loneliness. Daniel knew that she needed more than just food or shelter. She needed safety, guidance, and someone to care for her. He looked around the busy market, noticing how the townsfolk ignored her. Some sneered, others whispered, and a few glanced in her direction with mild curiosity before looking away. No one approached her. No one offered her a hand, a smile, or even a kind word. And that made Daniel's decision easier. He could not leave her here. She deserved more than this crowded, noisy place where she was invisible. "Lucy," he said softly, crouching slightly so he was closer to her level again, "would you like to come with me? I have a ranch not far from here. It's quiet, and it's safe. You don't have to stay here if you don't want to." Lucy's eyes widened. No one had ever offered her something like this. She had been passed from one hand to another, left behind, ignored, or sold, but never had anyone simply asked if she wanted to come with them. Her stomach twisted with nervousness and fear. I don't know," she whispered. I've never been anywhere safe. What if?" Her voice trailed off. Daniel smiled gently. "It's okay to be scared," he said. "I know life has been hard for you, and you don't know me very well, but I promise I won't hurt you. You can come with me slowly, at your own pace. You can ask questions, and if you want, you can change your mind. I'll wait for you." Lucy felt her heart flutter. His words were calm and reassuring, and she noticed the sincerity in his eyes. She remembered all the times she had prayed for someone to care for her, someone to notice her, someone who would not leave her behind. Could this man be the answer to her prayers? She wanted to say yes, wanted to run into safety, wanted to leave the market and its harsh words behind, but fear still held her back. Daniel crouched a little lower, keeping his distance but letting her see he was serious. "Lucy, it's okay. You don't have to decide right now. But I want you to know that you don't have to stay here alone. You've been through so much, and you deserve better. I can help you." Her fingers tightened around the bundle. She remembered the nights alone under the stars, the hunger, and the cold. She remembered being ignored, being told she was worthless. And yet something inside her told her that Daniel meant what he said. She had never trusted anyone so quickly, but his patience, his kindness, and the way he looked at her made her want to believe. Slowly, she nodded. Daniel extended his hand, careful not to startle her. "You don't have to take it if you don't want to," he said. "But we can walk slowly together, one step at a time." Lucy hesitated, then placed her tiny hand in his rough, calloused one. It was warm and steady, a comforting contrast to the chaos around them. She felt a mixture of fear and hope, but as they moved together she began to feel that maybe life could be different. Maybe someone could care for her after all. The townsfolk watched curiously as Daniel led Lucy away from the crowded market. Some whispered about her, some frowned, and others shrugged, uninterested in a child they had ignored all morning. But Lucy barely noticed. Her focus was on Daniel, the hand she held, and the thought of leaving behind a place where she had felt so small and invisible. As they walked, Daniel spoke softly about the ranch, describing the wide fields, the animals, and the quiet evenings under the stars. He painted a picture of safety and home, and Lucy listened, her imagination painting bright images of a place she had never known. She had always dreamed of a safe place, of someone who would care for her, and now, with every word Daniel spoke, that dream felt closer to reality. When they reached the edge of town, Daniel helped her onto a horse he had tied nearby. Lucy had never ridden a horse alone, and she was nervous, but Daniel stayed close, steadying her as she settled into the saddle. "You'll do fine," he said, encouraging her. "Just hold on tight and trust me." The ride to the ranch was slow, giving Lucy time to take in the world around her. She saw green fields stretching farther than she had ever imagined, animals grazing peacefully, and a small, sturdy house surrounded by fences and trees. The smell of fresh hay and earth filled the air, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of calm. When they arrived, Daniel helped her down gently. "This is your new home," he said softly. "You'll have your own room, your own bed, and food. You won't have to be alone anymore." Lucy's eyes filled with tears. She had never imagined anyone saying such words to her. She had spent so long thinking that she would always be alone, that no one would ever want her. And now, here was a man who had opened his heart to her, offering her a chance at a new life. She followed him into the house, still holding her bundle, still cautious, but also curious. The interior was simple but warm, with wooden floors and a fireplace that filled the room with a soft glow. There were animals nearby, chickens pecking in the yard, a few cows in the distance, and the sound of a gentle wind rustling the trees. For Lucy, it was a world she had never known, full of life, safety, and possibility. Daniel showed her to a small room with a bed and a few blankets. "This'll be your room," he said. "You can make it your own. Everything here is yours. You don't have to worry about anything for now. Just be yourself." Lucy looked around, amazed. She had never had a space that was entirely hers, never a place to call home. She sank onto the bed, feeling the softness of the blankets beneath her. She could hardly believe this was real. The fear she had carried for so long was still there, but it was mingled now with a cautious sense of hope. Over the next few hours, Daniel helped Lucy settle in. He showed her the kitchen, the barn, and the fields. He introduced her to the animals, explaining how to care for them. Lucy listened carefully, absorbing everything. She felt a sense of pride as she learned how to feed the chickens and brush the horses. Each small task made her feel capable and valuable, a stark contrast to the feelings of worthlessness she had carried for so long. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the ranch, Lucy sat outside, watching the sky turn orange and pink. Daniel joined her, sitting quietly, giving her space, but remaining close enough to offer comfort. She thought about the market, about the crowd that had ignored her, and about the hopelessness she had felt just hours before. Now everything seemed different. She had a place to belong, a person who cared for her, and a chance to start over. Daniel looked at her and smiled. "You've been very brave today, Lucy," he said. "I know it hasn't been easy, but I promise you're not alone anymore. We'll face the hard days together, and we'll enjoy the good ones too." Lucy smiled back, a small but genuine smile that lit up her face. For the first time in a long while, she felt safe. She felt seen. She felt that maybe, just maybe, life could be better than she had ever imagined. And in that moment, sitting on the ranch under the warm glow of the setting sun, Lucy realized that her story was no longer about being unwanted. It was about hope, new beginnings, and the possibility of love and care she had never known before. That night, as she lay in her small bed listening to the soft sounds of the ranch, Lucy allowed herself to dream. She dreamed of riding horses across open fields, of laughing with friends, of learning new things, and of being part of a family. And for the first time in her young life, she felt that dreams could come true. She drifted off to sleep, safe and warm, knowing that tomorrow would be a new day filled with promise. The morning sun poured golden light over the ranch, waking Lucy in her small, cozy room. She blinked sleepily, stretching beneath the soft blankets and listening to the gentle sounds of the animals outside. Chickens clucked in the yard, a cow lowed in the distance, and a soft breeze rustled the leaves of the nearby trees. It was a peaceful, quiet sound, so different from the chaos and dust of the market she had known. For a moment, Lucy just lay there, taking it all in. She felt safe, something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Daniel was already awake, moving quietly through the house. He peeked into her room with a warm smile. "Good morning, Lucy," he said softly. "Did you sleep well?" Lucy nodded.
"Yes," she whispered, a small smile forming on her face.
She still felt a little nervous. Even though she was safe, she had never lived in a house that felt like a home before. Everything was new and strange, the smells, the sounds, even the floorboards beneath her feet. But Daniel's calm presence made her feel that she could take one step at a time. "Today," Daniel said, "I'll show you around the ranch. There's a lot to learn, and I think you'll enjoy it." She had never been around a ranch before. She had seen animals at the market, but that was very different. Here, they roamed freely, and caring for them was a real responsibility. She felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. What if she made a mistake? What if she wasn't good enough? Daniel seemed to sense her hesitation. "Don't worry," he said. "I'll be right here with you. You can learn slowly, and if you make a mistake, that's okay. Everyone makes mistakes when they're learning something new." Their first task was feeding the chickens. Daniel handed Lucy a small basket of grain. She knelt beside the coop, carefully sprinkling the feed as the chickens rushed forward, clucking and pecking eagerly. At first she was nervous, afraid the birds might peck her, or that she would spill the grain. But as she watched the chickens eat and move slowly, she realized it wasn't so hard. In fact, she began to feel proud. She was helping. She was useful. And for the first time in a long time, she felt capable. After the chickens, Daniel led her to the barn, where a few horses waited. One of them, a gentle brown mare, nickered softly as Lucy approached. She reached out a trembling hand to stroke the horse's mane, feeling its warmth and strength beneath her fingers. Daniel showed her how to brush the horse, how to check its hooves, and how to speak softly to keep it calm. Lucy followed his instructions carefully, and by the end of the morning, the mare seemed relaxed and content, clearly trusting her. Lucy couldn't help but smile. She had never imagined herself caring for a large, powerful animal like this. It was amazing to feel the connection, to know that she could help and that the animal trusted her. Daniel noticed her excitement, and nodded approvingly. "See," he said, "you're doing very well. I knew you had a strong heart." After a simple breakfast, Daniel introduced Lucy to the rest of the ranch. There were fields to explore, fences to repair, and animals to care for every day. He explained the routines, showing her how to collect eggs from the chickens, feed the cows, and gather fresh water for the animals. Lucy listened carefully, asking questions when she didn't understand. She found that she enjoyed learning, and each small success made her feel more confident. As the days passed, Lucy began to find a rhythm in ranch life. She woke early, helped with chores, and explored the fields with Daniel. She learned to ride the horses more confidently, to herd the cattle gently, and even to help mend fences when they were broken. Each new skill brought a sense of accomplishment. She realized she was strong and capable, even after all the hardship she had endured. One afternoon, Daniel taught her how to plant vegetables in a small garden near the house. Lucy had never worked with soil in this way before, but she enjoyed the process. She carefully dug small holes, planted seeds, and watered them with care. Watching the earth receive her work felt like planting hope itself. She thought about how small things, when done carefully, could grow into something beautiful. It was a lesson she carried with her, one that applied not only to plants but also to her own life. Evenings on the ranch were peaceful. The sun would set over the fields, painting the sky with oranges, pinks, and purples. Lucy often sat outside watching the horizon and listening to the quiet hum of nature. Daniel would join her, sometimes in silence, sometimes sharing stories of his life on the ranch. He told her about storms he had survived, animals he had cared for, and the lessons he had learned over the years. Lucy listened intently, feeling a sense of belonging she had never known before. She began to notice changes in herself. She laughed more freely, spoke more confidently, and no longer felt the crushing weight of loneliness. She had a purpose now, to help care for the ranch and its animals, to learn and grow, and to build a life where she mattered. Each day brought small victories, feeding the animals without fear, riding a horse across the fields, or planting seeds that would one day grow into food. Daniel watched her progress with quiet pride. He could see the transformation in Lucy, the way her spirit began to shine through the fear and sadness she had carried for so long. He knew it would take time for her to fully heal, but he was patient. He understood that trust, once broken, took time to rebuild. He offered guidance, encouragement, and gentle correction when needed, always making sure she felt supported rather than pressured. One evening, as the sky turned a deep shade of purple and stars began to appear, Lucy walked to the edge of the field with Daniel. She looked out over the open land, feeling the wind in her hair and the freedom of the wide fields. "I never knew life could feel like this," she said softly. "I never thought I could be happy again." Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's because you've been given a chance to grow," he said.
And you've taken it. You've worked hard, learned new things, and faced your fears.
"That's why you feel this way now. You earned it, Lucy." She smiled, feeling the truth in his words. For the first time she realized that her past, though painful, had not defined her. She had the power to shape her future, to learn, to grow, and to create a life filled with hope and joy. The ranch was no longer just a place of work. It was a place of possibility, a place where she could belong. As weeks turned into months, Lucy continued to thrive. She became more skilled at caring for the animals, more confident on the horses, and more adept at managing chores around the ranch. Daniel often praised her efforts, and neighbors who visited the ranch were impressed by her knowledge and courage. She was no longer the timid, abandoned child in the market. She had become a young girl full of life, hope, and determination. At night, as Lucy lay in her bed, she reflected on how much had changed in her life. She thought about the market, the loneliness, and the fear she had carried for so long. She thought about Daniel, who had shown her kindness when no one else would. And she thought about the ranch, the animals, and the fields that stretched endlessly before her. Slowly, she realized that she had found a home, not just a place to sleep, but a place where she was valued, loved, and capable of growing into someone strong and confident. And so, life on the ranch became Lucy's new reality. Each day brought challenges, yes, but also joy. Learning and small victories, she had found safety, friendship, and a sense of purpose she had never known. With Daniel's guidance and care, she was growing into a young girl who knew her own worth, who could face life with courage, and who finally understood that she belonged somewhere. The ranch was not just a home, it was a place of transformation, a place where Lucy discovered her strength, her confidence, and the beauty of hope. The sun rose over the ranch again, painting the fields with warm golden light. Lucy woke feeling a sense of peace she had never known before. The soft blankets, the familiar sounds of the animals, and the gentle hum of the wind through the trees made her smile. She stretched and looked around her small room, feeling gratitude for everything she had been given. Life on the ranch had changed her in ways she had never imagined. She was no longer the timid, lonely girl who had stood in the market, ignored by everyone. She was someone who mattered, someone who could care for herself and others, and someone who had found a true place to belong. Breakfast was quiet and calm. Daniel had prepared eggs from the chickens Lucy had been feeding for weeks, along with fresh bread from the small kitchen. Lucy helped herself carefully, smiling as she realized how comfortable she felt in the routine. She poured milk into a cup, watching the steam rise, and thought about the life she had left behind. The market, the dust, the lonely nights, those memories no longer filled her with fear, only with the knowledge that she had overcome them. After breakfast, Daniel had a surprise for her. "Today," he said, "we're going into town. I want you to see something." Lucy's eyes widened. She had been to town before, to the market, but those memories were filled with fear and loneliness. She had been ignored, laughed at, and made to feel small. She wasn't sure if she wanted to face that world again. Daniel noticed her hesitation. "It's okay to be nervous," he said kindly, "but I want you to see how far you've come. You've learned so much, and people are going to notice. You deserve to be seen for who you really are." Lucy nodded, gripping her bundle tightly. "Ah!" She followed Daniel down the path from the ranch to the dirt road that led into town. The ride was slow and peaceful, giving her time to take in the sights she had never truly appreciated before. The fields, the animals, and the blue sky stretched out around her, reminding her of how wide and full the world could be. As they entered town, the familiar sounds of the market greeted them, clanging pots, shouting merchants, and the chatter of townsfolk. But this time, Lucy felt different. She was no longer the frightened girl who had been ignored. She walked with Daniel, her shoulders straight, her head held high. People noticed her, and this time, she felt a quiet confidence that she had never had before. They stopped near the main square where the market had been so chaotic the day Daniel had first found her. Merchants recognized him and greeted him warmly, as he had been known in town for years. Lucy watched the people, expecting whispers or judgment, but instead she noticed curiosity and respect. People were looking at her, not with pity, but with interest. They could see that she had grown, that she had learned, and that she carried herself with dignity. Daniel knelt beside her. "See?" he said softly. "People notice you now not because of who you were, but because of who you are becoming. You've earned this." She realized he was right. She had worked hard on the ranch, learning, growing, and proving to herself that she was capable. The fear and sadness that had weighed her down for so long were still there, but they were now outweighed by hope, confidence, and pride. She felt stronger than she had ever felt before. As they walked through the town, people began to approach them. A woman from a nearby farm smiled at Lucy and said, "I hear you've been helping Mr. Daniel on his ranch. The animals look healthy, and the garden is growing beautifully."
You've done well, young lady.
She had never received praise like this. Thank you," she whispered, her voice small but steady. A group of children playing near the square ran over to her, curious and friendly.
"Are you Mr. Cometh?"
"Daniel's helper?" one of them asked. Lucy nodded, and they smiled. For the first time she felt included, part of a group, and not invisible. They asked her questions about the ranch, the horses, and the chickens, and she answered proudly, realizing how much she had learned. Daniel watched her with pride. "You see," he said, "you're not the same girl you were before. You're strong, smart, and kind. You have a place here, and people are starting to see it." Lucy's confidence grew as they walked through town. She greeted people, answered questions, and even helped a merchant pick up some fallen apples from a basket. Each small interaction reinforced her belief that she belonged, that she had value, and that she could face the world without fear. After their walk, Daniel led Lucy to a quiet spot near the town fountain. The water sparkled in the sunlight, and Lucy sat on the edge, swinging her legs gently. "Daniel," she said softly, "I never thought I could feel this way. I never thought I could be happy, safe, and proud of myself." Daniel sat beside her.
You've earned it, he said. You worked hard, learned new things, and faced your fears.
"But more than that, you believed in yourself, even when it was hard. That's why you're here now. This is just the beginning, Lucy. Your life is full of possibilities." Lucy smiled, feeling tears of happiness welling in her eyes. She had come so far, from the dusty market where no one wanted her, to the ranch where she had learned, grown, and found safety. She realized that life was no longer about fear or loneliness. It was about hope, courage, and the people who cared for her. Over the next weeks, Lucy continued to flourish. She became more confident in her abilities on the ranch, learning to ride horses expertly, care for animals independently, and even help Daniel with tasks he once thought too difficult for a child. Her laughter filled the ranch, a sound that had been missing for so long. The animals responded to her gentle touch and calm voice, and neighbors began to notice her growing presence and skill. Lucy's transformation did not go unnoticed in town. People began to speak highly of her, telling others about the kind, capable young girl who had arrived at Daniel's ranch. She was no longer the girl who had been abandoned or ignored. She was someone who inspired others. A young girl who had faced hardship but had risen above it with courage and determination. One afternoon, Daniel took Lucy to the edge of the fields to watch the sunset. The sky was painted with brilliant colors, and Lucy sat in quiet awe. "Do you see, Lucy?" Daniel asked. "This is your life now. It's full of light, beauty, and hope. You've worked hard to get here, and you deserve every bit of it." Lucy nodded, feeling a deep sense of peace. "Thank you, Daniel," she said softly. "You didn't just save me from the market. You helped me believe in myself, and you gave me a place to belong." Daniel smiled. "I only helped you see what was already inside you, Lucy. You were brave, strong, and capable all along. I just helped you find it." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Lucy felt a sense of completion. Her journey from abandonment to belonging, from fear to confidence, had brought her here, to a place where she was loved, respected, and seen for who she truly was. She knew there would still be challenges, but she also knew she could face them. She had found her home, her mentor, her friend, and herself. That night, as she lay in her bed, Lucy reflected on everything she had experienced. She thought about the dusty market where she had been ignored, the moments of fear and uncertainty, and the tiny flickers of hope that had kept her going. She remembered the first time Daniel had smiled at her, the first loaf of bread, and the gentle hand that had led her away from loneliness. Now, in her warm bed, surrounded by the sounds of the ranch and the safety she had longed for, Lucy felt gratitude, pride, and hope. She had survived the worst moments of her life and had emerged stronger, wiser, and ready to face the world. She knew that life was not perfect, but it was full of possibility. She had learned that courage, kindness, and hope could transform even the darkest situations. As she drifted off to sleep, Lucy dreamed of the future, riding across the fields on horseback, tending the animals, helping Daniel, and perhaps even teaching other children who had faced hardships like hers. She knew that she had found her place in the world, a place where she could grow, thrive, and belong. Her story had begun in a dusty market full of fear and neglect, but it had led her to a life full of love, respect, and endless possibilities. And in the quiet night under the stars that twinkled above the wide-open fields, Lucy finally understood that she was no longer the girl nobody wanted. She was someone who mattered, someone who had been seen, someone whose life had been transformed by hope, courage, and kindness, and that was the greatest gift she could have ever received.